A very warm welcome to you all. I am Vijay KR. I am the faculty of history here at L2A. So, in this class today, let us try to understand the emergence of history as a discipline. So, we all know that history as a discipline has been, has its records from the ancient times. We only think from, if you look at it, if you think from the only Western perspective, then we go back to the Greek writings. If you think from the Western perspective, as Western scholars have said that. So, we go back to the Greek writings. So, we all know that Herodotus was the father of history, and in 430 BCE, he recorded for a systematic inquiry into the events that were happening in his times, especially the Greco-Persian wars was happening at that point of time. Greco-Persian wars. So when this Greco-Persian war was happening, it was the norm of the day that the historians, the scholars used to travel along with the military people of the time and record the events. In addition to that, he traveled far and wide. Herodotus traveled to Egypt. Herodotus traveled to Syria, basically that Iraq, the Iran, and even the present, now at that point of time it is called Persia, but now it is a present day Iran. So when he traveled to these areas, he not only recorded the war events, but also he systematically collected information from various sources, various scholars in those regions, and he also recorded them and presented in a 9-volume book. Known as Histories. For systematically collecting those information, recording them and presenting to us, for that he was called father of the history. In his 9-volume books, he not only recorded the events of the war that was happening between Greek and Persian Empire, but also he talks about Egyptian civilization, he talks about the mummification process, he talks about the cultural practices of the Egyptian pharaohs and the common people, and also talks about the Scythians who were on the far fringes of the Persian Empire. So, how they used to collect cannabis and use it for pain management, how they used to bury them, and also he talks about the burial practices and the mummification practices of the Egyptians. So, for that he was also called as the ethnographer, first ethnographer. First ethnographer. And also he was also called as the father of anthropology. He was not only called as a father of history, but also as a father of anthropology and also an first ethnographer. Secondly, for detailing out the Nile Delta and how did the Nile Delta help the Egyptians in producing agricultural surplus and as well as the emergence of civilization. So he talks about that also, for which he is also called as the father of historical geography. He is also called as the father of historical incidentally he never traveled to India. Herodotus has never traveled to India, but he heard from other travelers and write and mentions about the events and about he talks about the certain cultural practices of the Indian subcontinent, and that is mentioned especially in the third volume. Out of 9 volumes, third volume he talks about the cultural practices of certain Indian tribes in the Indian subcontinent. So, for example, it is kind of a fictional account because he must have heard it from some travelers traveling, at that point of time. So, he spoke about, there is a kind of an ant in the size of a mammoth, is a big size ant in the size of a small mouse, in the sense a big mouse, which was, which used to dig gold out of the sand. And the tribes living nearby used to collect this sand in the midday while the ants were hidden in the underground. So, some kind of fictional account he talks about Indian tribes and also certain cultural practices. In addition to that, he also talks about certain tribes where they used to eat their elders as a mark of respect. So, we all know that these are all fictional accounts. He must have heard it from other travelers. So, they always wanted to, picture the unknown in a very fictional way, so that it creates interest among those people who read about the narrative. So, if you look at the emergence of history as a discipline, we have based on the Western narrative, people trace back the historical narrative to the Greek authors, okay, and for their systematic collection of information from various sources, analyzing those information, recording those information, and presenting in the form of various books. So, that is why the Western influence, the West, how did they perceive history as a discipline, always trace back to the Greeks. And incidentally or coincidentally, when they look, even though India has a very vast ancient civilization where we have our prehistoric men right from 5 lakh BCE and even the Indus Valley civilization, so they did not consider that ancient Indians has historical sense. That is why they don't consider as ancient Indian scholars having any historical sense. Okay. So, as you must have been surprised, if you look at all the disciplines in UPSC which is offering for you mains, for that matter, you look at anthropology. There is a clear cut. The first chapter is dedicated to the origin of anthropology. It is etymological origins, and how the discipline of anthropology has emerged. Okay. Same is the case with sociology also. Same is the case with other disciplines. But history in Indian, especially the subject history, offering for UPSC, they doesn't talk about the origins as a discipline because it is all very contested and a very kind of a very difficult subject. Not difficult in the sense, but Indian historians don't agree to the notion of this controversial topic, because from the Westerners' point of view, they trace their ancient origins from the Greek authors. But we had our Rig Veda, we had our Vedic society, Vedic scriptures, we have our Smritis, we have our Shruti literature, we have our Purana literature, and also major epics, and other secular books. So we have our own this thing, but they always accused. Who has accused? The Western scholars and the Western colonial administrators have accused the Indians that in the ancient India, especially the Brahmins, doesn't have a historical sense, and not one volume of historical importance was produced in ancient India. Okay. No, that is altogether a different, topic that we would take it up at a later stage. But even though we need to understand how the history as a discipline has emerged, in the as a mark to the subject from the Western point of view. Okay. So, as we all know, Herodotus is father of history, and he wrote in his 9 volume. So, his contemporary was Theodosius. This Theodosius died. So, he makes a critic of the Herodotus events, record of the past, and he says that whatever he heard, and for his fictional accounts of various cultures, he criticizes him because it is all about myths, and it's all about myths. He criticizes Herodotus by saying that they are all about myths. But one contribution of Theodosius, who is a contemporary of Herodotus, is that it's the recording events of the military history. The military history, because he is referring to the Polynesian War. He is talking about the Polynesian War, which was happening, in the Greek at that point of time. So, military history, because of his recordings of the military history, Westerners think that his military history is a stand apart because he is not giving any divine origin or the kind of a divine explanation to the historical writings. So it was all secular. The secular way of writing history starts from Theodosius. So he becomes very important. Then you have many Roman scholars, you have many Greek scholars who have traveled. They are not historians, but they were all travelers. They are all, and official historians of Alexander. They have all traveled length and breadth along with the Alexander and record all the events, what was happening, where they went. They have they present us with very good geographical knowledge of the world. When they come to India, especially the Indian subcontinent, they give us about the rivers of the Satluj, all the various passages, Nearchus, then Aristobulus, then Onecrates of the Alexander historians. We have Arrian, we have Strabo, we have Ptolemy geography, we have Pliny the Elder, we have historians like Pericles of the Arthurian Sri, who is an anonymous Greek author. Then we have various, Greek and Roman, it was kind of a Greco-Roman scholars. Okay. So that you put it in the ancient part of the historical development, that the discipline of history as marked by the Western scholars, that it is the ancient writings developed from the historical writings have developed from the Greek and Roman sources or scholars. Okay. So now coming to the medieval times. So as you all know, medieval times in the 4th century AD, after the death of Jesus Christ, and all the apostles of Jesus Christ traveled to length and breadth across the world in different directions, and Peter the Rock comes to Italy, comes to Italy and professes Christianity. And there was a kind of a wide scale revival happening, because the Roman Empire at that point of time having it was all pagan religions, they were following the pagan religions. And so there was a kind of a wide popular, uh, religious upheaval that was happening around that time in the 3rd and 4th century BC, not BC, AD, 3rd CE. So the Constantine, the Roman Empire emperor Constantine adopted Christianity and propagated it along. Okay, so the entire medieval period, church took an important position. Church took an important position, and it was granted the divine origins theatre to monarchy, and there was a church blessing always for the rulers of Europe or the emperors of Europe, and it fabricated in India, as we also have the divine blessings of the Brahmins, and so similarly the church has given the divine monarchy. The principle of divine monarchy, because he was the right hand man of God ruling on the earth. So, in the medieval period, history, the historical writings are only found in the clergy or the church annals, church annals and emperor chronicles. Emperor chronicles. For example, there is this Anglo-Saxon chronicles, Anglo-Saxon chronicles. So this was literally used by the church to, like a liturgical purposes. They used to use, and the history was like mostly liturgical purposes, and it was all the clergy annals and the emperor's chronicles. So not much of a historical writing was noted, and we all know that the Middle Ages in Europe was also called as the Dark Ages. It was known as the Dark Age. It's also known as the Dark Ages. Now, so nothing much of historical writings we are mentioned in the medieval time. But coming to the more recent, from the 13th century onwards, you know 13th and 14th century, see, after the fall of Constantinople, the Eastern Byzantine Empire, Roman Empire, it fell in the hands of the Ottoman Turks, and many of the scholars who were living, majority, the Byzantine Empire has adopted Greek as their language. It was culturally very rich than the Eastern Roman Empire, which was ruling in Italy, because the when in Italy, the Roman Empire collapsed around some 376 CE. Then, this one branch of the Roman Empire went to the went to the Constantinople, that is present day Ankara, Turkey, and it continued till 1453. fall of Constantinople. It continued till 1453. That that is where the Byzantine Empire has declined because of the fall of Constantinople. So many of the scholars in the 13th and the 14th century in Europe especially. So the history as we know today as a discipline had started to emerge from the 13th and 14th century Europe, especially in Italy. So one Mr. particularly, Cicero, this Petrarch. Petrarch is a Italian scholar. He coincidentally discovers the old manuscripts or the records of Cicero. So he discovers the records of Cicero. Who is Cicero? Cicero is a Roman statesman of the 1st century BCE. He was the Roman statesman. So he discovers Cicero's records, and what Cicero wrote? He wrote on laws. He wrote a record on laws. And other books also he written, but on laws is important because in Cicero's on laws book, it's a Latin book in which he refers Herodotus to be the father of history. So he is the one. So Cicero was the one who called Herodotus as the father of history. Okay, because of his systematic inquiry into the events of the war between the Greek and the Persians, as well as recording the cultural practices of other countries where he has visited, and also for his record of the ethnographic practices and also on the geographical details. So for that, Cicero called him as the father of history. So Petrarch, especially Petrarch, Italian scholar, digs out the records of the Cicero, especially the art and other scholars. All the ancient manuscripts. He discovers the ancient manuscripts. He studies these primary sources at that point of time. He studies these primary sources of ancient Greek and Roman sources, and try to say that history is a systematic narration of events and needs to dig out or write history based on the primary sources. So that was Petrarch. So fast forwarding, another events happening, this Renaissance, this entire period is called as Renaissance. 13th to 17th century. See, so this entire Renaissance period, not only Petrarch finding the Cicero's records, ancient manuscripts and books, other books. After the fall of Constantinople, many scholars have ran away to the Greece, especially the Greek coastal areas, Vinova, then Milan, Venice. So they have revived the entire ancient manuscripts and try to understand the historical writings and try to produce the history as we know today. At least the beginning has happened in the Renaissance period. So another important event in the Renaissance period that happened was the discovery, the invention of printing press in Germany. Yeah, the Gutenberg printing press in Germany in 1440. Around this time, printing press was found. So what was the first book that was published? It was the Bible that was first published in from Latin to Germany. So from then onwards, lot of other ancient, a lot of other books, ancient manuscripts and books which were in Greek and Latin were translated and published into various European languages, especially the Slavic and especially the Romance languages, especially what we call as the Romance languages. It was converted, translated and published into, so that more number of scholars, because not many scholars knew Latin in Greece. Only the clergy used to know and other scholars used to know about Latin, and Greece. But as it was in these colloquial languages, especially the Roman, the Germany, then the French and the English. So when the books got converted into, translated into these languages, more people, more scholars started reading all the ancient wisdom, and they were very abrupt with the knowledge. So they always dug out the knowledge of the ancient wisdom and try to present and to try to develop a history as a discipline. So German another important you need to know, another person you need to know in the, for the development of history as a discipline was Jean Bodin. During the Renaissance period was a Jean Bodin. So he was the one who tried to, he wrote a book called Methods for the, is a French scholar. Methods for the easy comprehension of history. Methods for the easy comprehension of history. What is this methods for easy comprehension of history? He tried to, going back, digging the ancient manuscripts or going back to the primary sources that we need to study from the primary sources and produce actual and authentic facts. Second thing, he also suggested for going for an interdisciplinary or corroborating the facts with other sources, especially other writers, other contemporary sources, archaeological sources. So archaeology at that point of was not developed, but other interdisciplinary approach like with religious texts, historical documents with religious texts and philosophical texts. So he always suggested for an interdisciplinary approach. So for the easy comprehension of history, he divided it into three parts. History, he categorized the historical reading or the history into three parts. One is natural, human and divine. Natural, human and divine categories. So everything that is related to the religion is categorized into divine. All the human agency, he is mentioning about the human agency in wars, in trials, tribulation, endurance, in the rise of kingdoms. He is talking about humans. And natural, he is talking about the geography, he is talking about various, trade routes, economies, and also prosperity at that point of time. So all the rich flora and fauna. So he divided those into history into natural category, human category, and as well as also the divine category. This is particularly in the 16th century France. Okay. So And one of the, another kind of a maxim that emerged during the Renaissance period was, maxim is the Latin maxim called as magistra vitae. Magistra vitae means history as a life teacher. History as a life teacher. So this, sorry. So the history as a life teacher has its origins with Cicero. He is the one who talks about history as life teacher. He talks about this as history as life teacher, and it's called as magistra vitae. Okay. So this kind of a concept, it is like a kind of a rules and regulations, kind of an exemplary values to the emperors of that period of time in the Renaissance period. So it's rules and regulations, it's morals and ethics, and a kind of lessons from the history that the rulers of Europe has to imbibe in them and to rule accordingly. So that is where the Cicero and the others have coined these terms. While Cicero is from the first century BCE, but the medieval scholars, while talking about the history, developed this and popularized the concept called as magistra vitae as nothing but history as our life teacher. Okay. So this is reflected, history as a life teacher is reflected in Machiavelli's treatise as El Principe, the Prince. It was written in 16th century. El Principe. The Prince. It's on the statecraft, it's on the moral values and the ethical dilemmas of the king, how a king should be. It's kind of basically a treatise on statecraft, while imbibing all the ancient wisdom what history teaches us. History as life teacher. So this is reflected in the Machiavellian treatise El Principe or the Prince. So that is about the in the the historical development and during the history as a discipline during the Renaissance period. Okay. So now going to a step further. Now the Enlightenment, the era of Enlightenment. In the era of Enlightenment, historical writings, especially the historical writings, were used to promote human agency, human individualism, rationality, and humanism. All the thinkers of the Enlightenment era, whether it is Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, all of them have used the ancient knowledge of history or the historical writings available to them at that point of time to enhance the role of rationality, as they use historical writings as a tool for promoting, tool for humanism and rationality. So that is why Voltaire, when he is talking about various civilizations, he talks about various civilizations. So when he is talking about various civilization, he is not giving credit to the divine origin theory as such. He is talking about how civilizations have grown in various parts. He is talking about in the Indian civilization, also he is talking about Chinese civilization or the Egyptian civilization across, and he is not giving any credit to the divine origin or the kind of what how the religious dogma has dominated the entire medieval Europe. But he talks independent. He talks about the causation, the cause and effect of the rise of civilizations or the fall of civilizations on its own merit, on various other factors, but not on the divine origin theory or anything which is related to religion. Okay, so that is where at that point of time there was this Gibbons. Edward Gibbons, he talks about, he wrote a, one of the first historical writing was Edward Gibbons. Edward Gibbons, the fall of the Roman Empire. He writes around this time in the Enlightenment area. He writes about the fall of the Roman Empire. He talks about the fall of the Roman Empire, and one of the causes was the clergy was also one of the causes for the intervention in statecraft that led to the fall of the Roman Empire. So that historical writings, taking out the religion, the church, and the clergy out of the equation and writing independent histories, giving causes to various factors, various structures, long-term structures have become a part and parcel of the Enlightenment era. So Edward Gibbon was one of the scholar and a historian. We consider, the Western scholars, we consider him as a historian or a historical writing. So you need to remember him. Then you have the Göttingen school in Germany. This was a school, Göttingen school in Germany. Göttingen school in Germany that popularized, and for the first time in 18th century they have introduced history as they have created a chair in history and created as a discipline. For the first time, history as a discipline was introduced in one of the universities in Germany, that is Göttingen school. From here onwards, Berlin, Germany has number of departments on history. So each and every university by the turn of the 20th century, Germany has highest number of departments on history, the formal discipline of history in German universities. Okay, so that is where, if you take the etymological, I'm just diverging here because I also wanted to introduce you here the etymological origins. Origins of word history. So the etymological origins of the word history is, as you all know, we have already discussed just now that ancient writings can be traced back to Historia. That is a that is a Greek word. Historia is a Greek word which literally means inquiry plus knowledge. Inquiry plus knowledge. So what is inquiry plus knowledge? Any knowledge acquired through inquiry or investigation is known as historia, or so that is where the origins have come from. So but the popularization of the history as a discipline was popularized by the German universities, especially the Göttingen university, and and for formal for all formal purposes, the word history was taken from the German word Geschichte. German word Geschichte. Geschichte means narration of past events. Narration of past events. So the modern, if you consider it as one of a modern simple definition, Geschichte means narration of past events, and it was the German universities who have popularized this word, and as well as the discipline of history. For the emergence of the discipline of history, German universities and later on the French and the English, basically the England, UK, United Kingdom, universities of United Kingdom has developed them. Okay, so we need to also remember here the one historian who talks about, especially during this period, Leopold von Ranke. He is the one who talks about the objectivity in history or the historical empiricism. He is the one who talks about the objectivity. As you all know, what is objectivity or subjectivity? History, how it happened, objectivity or historical objectivity or historical empiricism, as it is called, is how history has happened, how actually it happened. Based on the facts, you need to present the facts in such a way that as it happened, you need to present. In the sense that there is no kind of an interpolation. You don't, even if you don't understand the cause and effect of it, what are the various factors that affected that event, it is immaterial for them, especially in the objectivity part of it, because history as it is written based on the facts. So that is when objectivity. Subjectivity is what, we have many Puranas which have been, written, even till the times of the 12th century CE, and there were many historical, there are many versions, many interpolations. So, there is always a kind of a subjectivity which, because the author, the historical author, whoever is writing history, was also a product of his age, was also a product of his community, was also a product of the larger socio-cultural and economic and political dynamics, where he tends to include his own biasness. So there is always some kind of a subjectivity in history. But Leopold von Ranke, another German scholar, always he was the one who suggested there should be objectivity in historical writing, present the facts as they are or how history has happened. Okay, so this is this is another milestone in the historical development or the discipline of history. Then comes your Annales school of history. Annales school of history, Mark Bloch, and February. These are the two scholars who developed this Annales school of history, by deviating from the objectivity or the historical empiricism as suggested by Ranke. and they talk about what are the events that have occurred and what are these long-term structures which have affected. What are these long-term structures? Structures in economy, structures in polity, structure in cultural structures which have affected the events or the places and historical events, basically talking about historical events, how they have shaped history, how they have shaped that events based on the study of structures, long term structures, by deviating the, it is, apart from this political history. So, apart from the political history or the king, the history of kings and their reigns and all those things, so they deviated from that, and the primacy was given to the long-term structures which shaped the events of the past, whether it is economical structures, economy structures, or the structures of polity, or the structures of economy and cultural structures, or of the society as a whole. So, this Annales school of history is very important for us because it was one of the important, because they talk about long term structures. First thing. Second thing, they also rely on the primary sources. To go to the primary sources, then also conduct an interdisciplinary approach, study from other corroborative sources which were available to them, and also from other interdisciplinary subjects like geography, interdiscipline like philosophy, religion, etc., etc. But as you know, they also emphasized on the total history, the problem solving history, or what they call it as a problem approach history. Problem solving history, or, and in totality, they talk about history in totality. History in totality. So it's very important. They talk about long term structures, economic structures, cultural structures, political structures, religious structures. Apart from not giving primacy to the political, only political events and related to kings and wars, etc., etc., but other social factors. Okay, then interdisciplinary. Then how history solves problems. You know, so in, and history in totality they talk about that. So analyst school is very important in the emergence of the history as a discipline. Okay. So as you all know, so till then, only in the ancient period, if they are only talking about the political or the military history, that is there. In the medieval period, it's all about the emperor chronicles and the clergy liturgies. That was a part of history. And in the modern, especially the Renaissance period, historical records have been discovered by various scholars, and they started to dig into the more complex form of ancient Greco-Roman authors and try to bring out history as they were. Like, and especially you remember Machiavelli, the prince, especially during the Renaissance period, and then the concept of magistra vitae means history as a life teacher. History as a life teacher. History as a life teacher. So, from the annal school, the other schools of historical development has happened. The Marxist school has emerged, Frederick Engels and Karl Marx, Marxist school. Then majority of the Indian historians, especially during the formative years of the Indian national movement, and even after till 19 till recent years, the leftist school, especially the Marxist school, has dominated the historical writings. Then there is this the imperialist school of historiography which developed. It was basically giving primacy to the cultural hegemony of the British Empire, so that it wants to perpetuate the colonial rule across the globe. So they gave importance to the primacy to the imperialist historiography, where they undermined the local cultures in different regions. As it is the civilizing effort of the British Empire, to rule those regions or countries as a civilizing mission. So the imperialist school have developed like that. Anil Seal is a very important scholar in that. Then uh, then you have G.A. Gallagher is also the Cambridge school, or it is called as the imperialist school. Then you have many colonial administrators, especially various viceroys like Lord Dufferin, Lord Minto, and Lord even the partition of Bengal. During that Lord Curzon, they were all British imperialist. They belong to the British imperialist school. Then you have Henry Lowett, and so on and so forth. They all, when we take up the historiography of the Indian history, we'll talk about them. But many schools have emerged in the later part of the 19th and the 20th century, especially 19th and 20th century. One is the after the Annales school, then the Marxist school have come. They always talk about the class structure. The history is all nothing about the class structure between the rule and the rule and the rulers and the class structure. Then you have the imperialist school. And then you have nationalist school. Then you have subaltern school. So this is how history has emerged as a discipline from the ancient origins till the early part of the later part of the 19th century and the 20th century. How history has developed as a discipline. So we don't discuss, the history in a UPSC history syllabus. We don't have any of this because this was not categorized as a particular topic, because one needs to understand here, because the history as a discipline by Western scholars had traced their origins from the ancient Greece and Roman scholars, but they never considered whether the British imperial historians or the British colonial administrators, when they acquired the Diwani rights of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa after the battle of Buxar, Plassey and Buxar, it was a kind of an administrative necessity to understand the cultural practices of the Indians, especially the majority Hindus and Muslims at that point of time, to rule their, to give judgments. After the Charter Act of 1773, the Supreme Court of Bengal was established. So they had to give judgments on the personal law. So they then dig up and translated many classical treatises at about this point of time. And that period, the Asiatic Society of Bengal, which was formed in 1784, Sir William Jones, Sir Wilkins, Colebrook, they have translated Bhagavad Gita, the Code of Gentoo Laws, Manu Dharma Shastra, then Dayabhaga, the property treatise, and then Abhignana Shakuntalam was translated. So many of those things happen. So when they were then they discover the perception of Indian culture, or the historical sense, or reconstructing or rediscovering India as an administrative necessity by the colonial administrators, emerged in the later part of the 18th century, later part of the 18th century and entire 19th century, you know, India was being rediscovered. Civilizations of India were being rediscovered at that point of time. So then it comes, who are those, who are those Orientalists who, that they believed by discovering various treatises, translations, and all those things. It almost uh, grew into a kind of a debate. This is Orientalist and utilitarian. See, the Orientalist, we just briefly, I'll just try to tell you. Orientalist, nothing but they believe that there was this ancient civilization that existed in India, and the Indians, in the ancient Indians, have produced many very profound work on religion, statecraft, and and various laws, especially the laws of primogeniture, laws of inheritance, and other social codes like Manadharma Shastra, etc. So that is where the Orientalists, Indologists have developed. Max Muller was one of them, and so many Indologists were part of the colonial administration, especially the Asiatic societies and the Indologists in Germany and other places. So they believed in there was this historical origins, ancient civilizations, and ancient the Indians culture, was equally good, and nothing inferior to the Western civilization. So that kind of the thing was brought by Orientalists, and the utilitarian, especially Jeremy Bentham and Stuart James Mill, they talk about the greater common good, and they say, it indirectly or directly perpetuated the colonial rule, saying that, it was a despotic rule. The Indians were always accustomed to the despotic tyranny of the rulers. So there is, Indianness was missing in the entire Indian civilization, or, in the history of India. And it was the civilizing mission of the British to occupy India and to take take India towards the progress or freedom. That was the that was the kind of debate that is happening. We will get back into it. So why I am saying, why I am introducing this class is because they have, as colonial, especially the colonial administrators, have negated, or they have said that the ancient Indians especially do not have a sense of historical understanding. They do not know how to write chronology or to record the events as per the chronology, as per these standards, as per the standards that which were considered by the ancient Greeks. So because they have their reference point by looking at the various ancient Greek scholars like Herodotus, Theodotus, and other Greco-Roman scholars. But here, because they have developed, they gave a chronological order, and the time, the concept of time, and a sequential order, and especially the chronology or the narration of events by going into the various sources. So that kind of a debate, that was always there. So now in the next chapter, what we will do, whether Indian historians have a historical sense or not, and we will talk about various historiographies of ancient Indian history. Okay, various historiography. What is historiography? Just to introduce you briefly, historiography is nothing but the art of writing history for a particular period of time, especially ancient India. So what are the various sources? So how are you interpreting those sources and producing it? So, historiography varies because, for example, to make you understand whether Ashoka is the reason for the decline of Mauryan Empire, Ramala Thapar says no, there are many other factors. Somebody like Har Prasad Shastri says that, the pacifist policy of Ashoka's Dhamma is the primary reason for the decline of Mauryan Empire. So this kind of a debate, because this is all rich historiography. What are the sorry, who are the various authors who studied exclusively all the primary sources, and what are their interpretations in explaining on a particular topic, that is historiography. So we'll talk about various historiographies of ancient Indian history, and also how do we reconstruct ancient Indian history through various sources. So on, we continue with the formal syllabus of UPSC History Mains. As a precursor to the first, as a precursor to that, I just gave you an introduction to this discipline of history, how the discipline of history has emerged, and which is coincidentally not available to us. It is not required. You don't have to require or remember that, but setting the context right is very essential for all of us. Why, why history was rediscovered, or the history of India was rediscovered or discovered by various authors. Who are those historiographers? Because history itself is, if you, in the common parlance, now there is some allegations that the NCERT is changing the entire syllabus. Now they are removing Aurangzeb from the syllabus, this and that, there are a lot of allegations. But how did we write history? What was the periodization of Indian history? How did we do that? This understanding the right context, how Indian history was written, in the initial phases by the colonial administrators, colonial historians, especially the British historians, V.S. Smith, Vincent Arthur Smith, and how the periodization was there. How did we modify? Then how did we record how the Indian scholars have went to the went to England and various German universities and studied history, and how did they produce history of India, especially D.D. Kosambi, like you have R.S. Sharma, you have for ancient India, you have then A.L. Basham, then Romila Thapar is the one. All those historians, how did they write ancient Indian history? How Satish Chandra wrote medieval Indian history? How Bipin Chandra and others wrote modern Indian history? So there are the setting the right context becomes very important for historical understanding. Okay, so with that we will put a full stop to this topic. But before going, I'll just a small topic on history as a life teacher. Okay, history as a life teacher means magistra vitae. इसका मतलब है कि history as a life teacher, as a moral values, as learning from the past, that becomes so. Sorry. Incidentally, this is one of the important purpose of history. Important purpose of knowing history, as because it is the history as life teacher, learning from the past mistakes. If you don't learn from the past mistakes, you are going to repeat it. What did Einstein say? Einstein said that don't repeat the same mistake again and again. If you do the same mistake again and again, you have never progressed or never evolved. You did not learn from anything that has occurred. So do a new mistake. Don't do you can do mistake, but don't do the same mistake again. That is what Einstein says. Because he must have succeeded after so many trials and tribulations, after so many treatises, after many assumptions he must have made in his physics. Later on, he came up with e to the m to the relativity, the theory of relativity. So many trials and tribulations. So don't do the same mistake. What saying? So learn from the mistakes and live in the present and prepare for a better future. So magistra, a very important purpose of learning history. Okay. So, I felt this concept as very important, because is a life teacher. It will guide you. It will teach about the past actors or the kings or the historical actors who were there, who have achieved great things, and how were they driven by their moral values, and how, what was their ingenuity, how did they overcome various trials and tribulations, and how did they succeed. That is the most important. How did they endure their pain, their sufferings, their shortcomings, and how did they perceive endurance, which made them great, which made them succeed. So that is all how history teaches us. So this is very important concept. I thought to re-stress or reiterate again. So then we are by mid of June, we are going to introduce you. L2A has come up with a program, especially I have come up with a program. It's called as crash course for nearly 30 days and for a 3 hours period every day. So that in which the crash course is based on PYQ analysis, and we are going to stress on the last 10 years questions. We have categorized them into syllabus and topic and subtopics, and what are these important areas thematically they have been asking in the last 10 years. Where should we stress on those areas, and where should we on a cursory glance where we can cover other topics. But we also have given primacy to the thematic based map pointing, as well as we are also giving four sectional and 2 full length in this program, and this is going to start from 16th of June 2025. This is for those who are appearing for history mains. So I bet your scores in history will never be less, and it will be in the range of 280 to 310, I guarantee it. Because I have come up with a publication based on the PYQs in the last 10 years. We have thoroughly reviewed, and all the historiographic content and a balanced answer perspectives was given in the book, and it is now available in the market. You can purchase it in the market here, available in ORN, as well as the book is also available in the platforms like Amazon, etc. So it is based on L2A PYQ analysis history optional book by Vijay KR. And here that will be given to you, and the course is basically based on the analysis and a comprehensive classroom orientation that will be provided to you, and it is a beneficial, and I guarantee you 280 plus score in history. The another course we are introducing is history foundation course. This is from 30th June for a period of 5.5 months, and this is for year 2026. Those who are interested in taking history as their optional and appearing for 2026 and even 27 for that matter. So history foundation becomes all the more important. I am going to take nearly 5.5 months, बोल रहा हूँ मगर मैं 6 महीना ले लेता हूँ, for a comprehensive coverage of each and every topic which is available to us as per the syllabus, and based on all the PYQs will be discussed. All the this is inclusive of test, and there are other programs which are exclusive of test. You need to pay separately for that. But if you are taking a foundation course with test series, you don't have to pay for separately for the test series. And the book which I wrote, as I was mentioning, the history PYQ book, which is available, that would be given, and this would be for a period of 6 months. And sure shot, I will cover each and every aspect, every topic of the syllabus along with critical analysis, historiography as per the chronological order and as per the thematic emphasis, so that you would not miss a single question beyond the syllabus and you will be able to write a informed answer. Okay. Then in addition to that, we have daily answer writing practice, DAWs, daily answer writing practice for history mains, those who are appearing for this mains 2025 daily answer at practice. Daily we will be giving you 2 questions, and the same day model answers, when you by the end of the evening I'll give you with the model answers, and based on your writing once you write your answer, we will have a discussion that would be evaluated and your comments will be given, and if you have, in case you have any doubts, we can also discuss one-to-one, and a mentoringship also will be provided in the daily answer writing practice. Then we have various other program for history is we have various test series. Which includes 4 plus 2, 6 plus 2, 8 plus 2, 8 plus 4, and this is for this 2025 mains, and we have 16 plus 2 for 2026. These are all sectional and these are all full length. So as per the syllabus, we have segregated them, and it's a kind of a paper that you need to write for 3 hours as well as for 250 marks each section also, and the evaluated within 7 days, and I would be evaluating you, providing you the feedback, and also mentorship also be provided once in 15 days. So based on the answer, so this is already started. You can take up this, and this validity would be for a period of 6 to 8 months period. Okay. For those who are writing 2025, the validity is there, but because anyway you would be writing it, so you know that 8 months validity is of no use, but you will be completing it. But you will otherwise also have it. So these are the courses which are offered by L2A, and I am Vijay KR, and I would be teaching history here. And let us bring out the nuances in history, the historical context, the purpose of history, the chronologies, and also the various authors who said what, and what are their interpretations in understanding each historical event, and how do we, how do we bring about a balanced and informed answer, so that the evaluator will give you the best of the best marks, and we will make history live in this class, and I welcome you all to our courses, and I take your leave now. Thank you.